Coming up in this episode.
But I could prove to you on the back of an envelope why Harry Potter would never work. So I was clearly the wrong agent for that.
I imagine if it feels frustrating for you for a first-time author, the idea that, I've got an agent, I'm being published, and then it just takes forever.
It's very hard on first-time authors. I think a superstition among agents that if you get a good synopsis, then you've got a rubbish novel. The producer's paranoid about, oh my God, the author's going to be very resistant to any changes. We need to make changes because the media are so different.
What would your main tip be for an aspiring author? Hello and welcome to this very first episode of The Hole in the Page, this new series on WRNC and World Radio Paris, in which we talk to all the people behind the scenes that make the books that you read into what they are. So strap in and welcome to this first episode in which we'll be talking to Meg Davis. She's a literary agent at Key Agency. So if you're ready, let's fall through The Hole in the Page.
I'm Meg Davis. I'm the managing director of a small British literary agency called Key Agency. We represent a lot of genre, so crime, science fiction, fantasy, some other like non-fiction and stuff, basically whatever takes a fancy. There's 4 of us in the agency and we're very busy. I came to be an agent through dumb luck and some failed careers. But when I finally found myself in book selling, that was the point where I discovered what an agent is and thought, oh my goodness, that's for me.
How would you define the role of a literary agent, and why should an author seek out a literary agent? Because it's one of those daunting things. You've written something, you need to now find someone who'll, bat for you. Why a literary agent, and, well, how do you get a literary agent? How to convince you?
It's really hard to promote yourself a lot of the time. It's really hard to stand up for yourself. So it really helps if you've got somebody who loves your work saying to a publisher, this is fantastic. It's much easier for an agent to do that. You also find it helpful where an agent actually has relationships with the publishers that might be right for your book, and to make those introductions, to problem solve, knowing the publisher, knowing you as a writer. If something goes wrong, it's the agent's job to sort of be the buffer and try and help everybody work it out. It's the guidance on contracts, what's normal, what's acceptable, what's completely not acceptable, and to fight that fight for you as well. And just generally to keep an eye on what's happening with your work and making sure that it's sold as much as possible. So not just the primary publisher, whether that's the English language publisher, or if you're writing in French language publisher, but also that is sold into translation and hopefully film and TV as well. So there's a lot of crucial work that the agent does just in like getting the work known, getting it out there, giving it the best chances it can have.
You brought up film and TV because at Key Agency you don't just represent novels and authors who write books, you also represent screenwriters.
That's right. It's very unusual for an agency to do both, or at least for one agent to do both, because it's a whole different skill set and it's a whole different set of relationships that you need. But I really like it. It's kind of how I was trained up as an agent. I really like it because there's a lot of sort of dialogue between the two sides of things, and where I'm talking to a writer, very often I can say, if you angled it a little bit like this or set it in a slightly different setting, it probably enhances its film and TV rights. But with script writers as well, it kind of refreshes your brain. So when I feel really bogged down in publishing and sort of think, everything takes so long, with script writing, there's always a sense of stuff going on and a sense of momentum. So I find it just like interesting to be able to do both.
It's funny. It says the pace between the two is completely different.
Very much so. It's getting slower in publishing because it takes such a long time to build a buzz around a book these days. So it used to be you'd do a deal with a publisher and the book would come out in 8 months' time. Now they're like a lead time of at least a year, so they can go to other authors, and because reviews have all gone online and the expert reviewer is less focused on those. So what you're needing is to go to other authors in a similar genre and wait for them to read it and hopefully give a blurb, and to talk to the booksellers and start a buzz there, and BookBub and book reads and getting the proofs out there to people who have been promoting books through their own channels. So all of that takes a massive amount of time. So it can be, you've got an 18-month wait before your book ever sees the light of day, which can feel really frustrating sometimes.
I imagine if it feels frustrating for you for a first-time author, is that something you see with your clients? The idea that, I've got an agent, I'm being published, and then it just takes forever?
It's very hard on first-time authors. You send it out to a whole bunch of agents, and some of them come back to you, and you have no idea when and if somebody's going to take you on. And if they do, then there's this like storm of activity while you're doing the edits for the agent, and the agent's doing all of that preparation to submit it to publishers. Then everything goes quiet for about months, maybe a year, until you know whether or not you're going to get a publisher. And then hopefully you do, and then there's this new storm of activity while you're doing the contract and learning everything about what the book contract is going to look like and what you're signing. And then everything goes very, very quiet again while the publisher gets on with their job. And then all of a sudden it's just like coming towards publication, and you've got your publisher asking for interviews or blog posts or stuff like that to support the publication of the book. So it's very difficult to just keep yourself steady through that process. It's not very writer friendly.
Very hectic, then very slow, then very hectic again, then I imagine very slow again. We often hear sort of the numbers on the first week or on the first month when we talk about big books. Is there, like you see in social media, sort of the spike at the beginning and then book sales drop off? So is there also that additional frustration for an author of having of seeing it then sort of phase out? I don't know if that's an additional thing to add to that up down motion.
Yeah, absolutely. That's you want to see big figures of your book being sold into bookshops, but in a bad scenario, a lot of those can just be returned by the bookshop when they're not selling them. So that's kind of soul destroying. The only thing that we can, tell our writers, it's a little bit like when you've got a racehorse and you've got like blinkers on them so that they don't see distractions and get spooked by things. It's just like, keep looking forward and write your next book, and I'll just deal with all of this stuff around you, but don't pay too much attention to it. It can be a very bruising experience until you're several books in and you've got used to the process and other stuff is happening, just to feel like you're in a landscape rather than some crazy roller coaster.
Okay, let's go back a little bit, because we've talked about what happens when you've been published. I think one of the takeaways I've got so far is have thick skin and be ready to take punches. before that, there's a whole other process. I mean, let's skip the minor detail of actually writing a book. Now you've written your book. A lot of people get obsessed about word count. Is word count important? You hear numbers such as 80 to 100,000 words. Is that something you
That's
take
the
into
sweet
account?
spot. It is. Some publishers don't care about it. Some publishers freak out if it's more than 100,000 words. Another good reason to think about 80 to 100,000 words is that you've got a better chance of selling into translation markets, because from English to any other language adds a third to the extent. And if your book is too long, it can make it too expensive to translate and publish. Hate to say anything other than a story should be what a story wants to be, but sometimes books are better for being pared down to 100,000, if at all possible, and then it makes the logistics of everything much easier.
What do you look for in reviewing an application? Someone's writing to you. I believe you take your applications over email mainly. You see a lot of first 50 pages plus a synopsis. Do you actually read those 50 pages, or will you sometimes read just a page or 2 pages and go, this isn't for me? How does that work?
I try and be diligent, because I'm very aware that it's taken somebody a year or more to write something, and I owe at least to them to give them proper consideration. There's always two things going through an agent's mind. Is it good? So is the story good? That's why we need the synopsis. Is the narrative good, so that we get a sense of the writing, if that's competent? Or, where is the quality pitched, and how much editorial work would it need? And the other question is, can I sell it? So does it fit into quite a narrow parameters of commercial publishing? I love anything that's quirky and weird, but publishers are making an investment, so it makes them quite cautious as to what they're taking on. So we have regular meetings with publishers saying, what are you looking for? What are you definitely not looking for? We keep an eye on the market, so if we feel something is saturated, if somebody comes to me with a Greek myth retelling, that's going to be problematic to sell at this stage. And there's some people writing things for the wrong reasons. We get, memoirs of people's favorite grandmother, and it's not necessarily something that's relevant to us today. And it may be lovely and a good social document, but not something that I feel that I could possibly sell. There's some people who feel they can't write in their own language, particularly if they're from very small countries, and they feel, well, I have to write this in English, but their command of English is not good enough, and I'm never going to be able to communicate editorially with them. So sadly, that's another problem. And we get submissions from 6-year-olds, and we get submissions from people who want to publish a book to make their name bigger because they're established in a different area, but they're writing something for the wrong reasons, and it's not something that's going to interest anybody else. So there's a lot of things that you can discount quite quickly. What you're looking for really is just somebody who loves their book, who loves storytelling, and who just wants to communicate to other people. And that takes us a very long way with agents.
Must be quite difficult to find that differentiating between someone who really cares about their book versus not. Not to mention the fact that we as a volunteer radio get an enormous amount of emails from people who want us to pass on their messages. I can't even imagine the scope of the work that you must have, the amount of submissions you must get on the daily. How how do you have time to sort through all of them?
It's not difficult. The majority of the people that you can tell pretty quickly that you're not, for one reason or another, you're just not going to be able to sell them. And the challenge then is the people who you sort of think, oh, okay, I'm going to have to take a deeper look at this and have a think about it. So that's really where the work comes, but it's also where the joy comes. There's a lot of excitement among all of us. It doesn't matter where you are as an agent. There's a real sense of excitement when you find a new talent, and you can't wait to get out there and tell your publisher friends, and you sort of think, oh man, I've got something really good. Now, which of my publishers really deserves this?
That must be truly rewarding to see an idea take shape as well. Even with the long process we were describing before, that feeling of spotting, I don't want to say a needle in a haystack, but spotting a talent, taking them to a publisher. When a publisher gets excited with you, is that a whole other level of excitement?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yes. There's nothing better than it's like anything that you might say to a friend about a book. It's just like, I love this book, you have to read it. And the friend goes, oh my God, that's amazing. And then you both feel like doubly rewarded. It's fantastic.
I think we hear a lot about the people who didn't catch the authors. I think in Harry Potter's case, for example, a lot of people go, imagine being the person who turned away J.K. Rowling. Is that a fear that you have of missing something, missing a diamond in the rough?
Oh yeah, constantly. I'm certainly very worried about it. And I have turned down a couple of writers who went on to be quite big. But in the early days of Harry Potter, there used to be a little huddle of agents at Agents Association meetings going, well, I didn't turn them down. And it was just like, I dodged that particular bullet, but absolutely, we're always worried about it. But if something's right for us, we perceive it. And I could prove to you on the back of an envelope why Harry Potter would never work. So I was clearly the wrong agent for that. And that's just how the chips fall.
And it might not have been as big of a success if a different person represented a different author. I suppose it is about finding the puzzle pieces that match, an author that goes with an agent that goes with a publisher, and so on and so forth.
That's a really good way of putting it, yes.
We talked about the synopsis very briefly earlier. I can imagine that would be, not to say daunting, but full-on terrifying for authors to have to condense, like you were saying, a year, potentially more than a year worth of work, complex narrative, all the plot twists, all the character building, all of that, down to fundamentally a cover letter, just an A4 page. Would you have any tips on how to go about doing that? How to best put forward your story in such a short format?
I would suggest keeping it simple and trusting the agent to know that it's a much more complicated and rich story than what they're seeing in the synopsis. There's, I think, a superstition among agents that if you get a good synopsis, then you've got a rubbish novel. And so we expect a synopsis to be dull and very matter of fact. All we want to know is what happens to the protagonist from A to Z, so that we know that the ending is satisfying, the ending is really important. We get a lot of confusion between what's a blurb and what's a synopsis. So there's nothing more frustrating than like, okay, this is an interesting story, and then the author is sort of thought it's like a back cover blurb, so you mustn't give away the ending. And so it's just like, what will they do next? And that's not what we need to know. We need to know it's a good ending. So that, I think, is a way of not getting too hung up on how to write a synopsis.
Spoilers are required in a synopsis.
Spoilers are required, and we'll read the actual text. We'll read the first 3 chapters. So this will begin to put the flesh on the bones and give us a sense of, what the voice is and who the other secondary characters are and all of that. We can work it out for ourselves.
Okay. So dull. I think that's a very interesting takeaway, because I can't imagine many people are writing their synopsis and they think it needs to be dull, it needs to be plain, it needs to be matter of fact. I think it probably instinctively, for someone who's writing, they want to captivate you, they want to get your attention. But okay, so maybe not with that. Broadly speaking, coming back even further, how would you recommend submitting to an agent? Are there bad practices that you see regularly? I imagine you get all sorts of strange strange submissions and strange formatting on submissions. What would be the key points to go for and the key things to avoid?
So I don't need to be sent chocolates or a naked photograph of the author. The key point really is to look at the agent's website and to look at their submission guidelines, because we've all got a way of streamlining the enormous volume of submissions that we get. And if it doesn't fit into our system, it's really difficult to just deal with that one in the way that the author has sort of made it slightly sticky for us. Most people have a similar guideline process. So it's not like you've got to have one format of your book for one particular agency. It'll probably do for most people. But some people like to have an initial email query. That doesn't work for me because it gives me 2 jobs rather than just one. It's just send me it and let me look at it rather than ask me if it's okay. But the submission guidelines are crucial.
And like you say, a lot of the time, it's often either the first 50 pages or the first so-and-so amount of pages, the first few chapters or a word count. It's usually that plus a synopsis. Is there usually something else?
It's nice to have a covering sort of blurb in the email. I get plenty of emails with no words at all and just 2 attachments, one being the synopsis and the other one being the first 3 chapters, and that's fine. I can deal with that. But it's also nice to get a sense of the person behind it. So who they are, whether they've got any publishing credits already or whether they have none, or why they wrote the book or something like that, just to sort of, I want to know a little bit about you as a person, because I do the same as an agent. I try and get stuff out there so that people think, yes, I'm somebody that they would want to be representing their work, or somebody that they just want to run away screaming from.
It's kind of what you were saying earlier. You want to see the passion, you want to know who the person is. Is there a key attribute that you look for, or key attributes that you look for in an author beyond that submission?
I like a professional attitude. So the sense that somebody's taking themselves seriously, taking their work seriously, feel that they deserve publication, but not too much ego, but also that they're working with professionals and this is a business. As much as it's got massively creative content, and the creative side is the most important, but it's still a business, and that the writer will be working with colleagues and hopefully getting along with them, but knowing that, it's part of the team, and we're all pointing in the same direction. We all want this to work, and we all want to support the writer, but for the writer to just sort of think, fine, this is my place in this, and this is how I'm going to fulfill that.
Know your role.
Yes.
We were talking about bad practices, and you said, I don't need a box of chocolates or a naked picture of the author. Is that something that has happened?
Yeah, I've also had a £10 note stuck to page 50, just as a big reward for getting there. This is back in the days of, we still get submissions on paper occasionally. Fortunately, less so. So it's less tempting to put in that little bribe. But I've also had people say that they would give me like 50 grand if I would represent them. And so it makes it no win, no way that I can lose on this. I will still get paid, because we don't obviously make any money unless we make money for the author. So as an incentive, people have offered me money, and that's not how it works. I should be interested in that because it means that I get paid. I like that, but it's not how the business works. And I like that it keeps us honest in that the only way we can move forward is with stuff that we believe in. And the money, if and when it comes, is a good thing. And that's obviously keeping the wheels turning. But the primary thing is that we are actually investing in an author that we think is producing really good stuff.
Also, £10 is a very cheap bribe.
I'd like to think I was more expensive than that.
Things to take away: don't try and bribe the agent. Don't send naked pictures. That being said, how do you stand out in a crowd?
You have to trust the quality of your work. You have to make it the best it can be. Reading a lot and having your work read by beta readers or a writers group or something like that, getting lots of feedback, especially from people that you don't think will like your book. It's interesting to hear that point of view as well. But being honest and having something to say, it's the quality that always shines out for us, and that's really what we're looking for more than anything else that might be, publishing credits or who or anything like that. It's just about the quality of the work.
That's I think it's the second time you've said it now that you don't need prior publishing credits. You don't need to be an established person. There's often this idea that maybe you need to already have a good social media presence or already be a television personality can just send a book, it seems, and it comes out. That's not something you look for necessarily, someone with an established public persona.
Not at all. There have been some big public embarrassments that way. Politicians who've written books that nobody wanted to read. And a famous supermodel as well springs to mind. If I go to a publisher and say, I have this novel, it's pretty good, the author has got 50 million followers, the publisher will go, oh, that sounds interesting, let me have a look, maybe we can improve the book editorially. But you can't really fool the public. What you really want, the best way of selling books, is by word of mouth. And if a book is mediocre but by somebody famous, a certain number of people will buy it. But the most recent word of mouth disincentive I've heard has been the James Patterson Dolly Parton novel, where it sounded great to me. I'd read anything by Dolly Parton, goodness me. But because she's so smart and so interesting, But apparently, like, people keep telling me the book is terrible, so I'm going to read something else. And that's the sort of grassroots um, way of that books get known, that writers get big, is people saying to each other, "I love this book," giving it as a present or something like that. That's really what we're after. So yeah, fame might come into the mix, but doesn't last and doesn't necessarily get any traction.
It's a good sort of short-term seller, maybe, but in the long run, a good book sells better. Um, you said earlier as well, try and get your friends and family to read your book. Bit of a difficult task sometimes. It's a trying to get. I'll take this from this radio perspective again. Trying to get friends and family to necessarily listen to a podcast that they're not interested in, or even the one that you think they might be interested in. They see 20 minutes, and that's daunting to certain people in this day and age. Getting someone to read a whole book, you really have to find a dedicated loved one. I would argue.
I suppose, and I've known plenty of writers whose spouses have never read anything that they've written. Um, it's not guaranteed that your loved ones will be interested in the contents of your brain. You're absolutely right. This is where writers' groups come in, so there's more of a quid pro quo. So you read their stuff, they read your stuff. That is a very simple and potentially easier way to make sure that your stuff is read.
To talk to other people. I imagine the internet has made that a lot easier as well, with different forums and groups.
Exactly, yes.
Do you, as an agent, go around certain forums sometimes looking for people, or do people exclusively come to you?
I should be out there looking. I know a lot of my colleagues do. At my stage in my career, I keep meaning to find the time and I never seem to. So I feel bad about that. I actually should be less passive about people coming to me. I do writers' conferences and I do one-to-ones and that kind of thing. So I try and make myself available. And it's always productive to have a conversation with a writer, because it has happened that I haven't thought the book was up to much or haven't understood it until I've talked to the writer. It's just like, oh, that's what you mean. That's really interesting. Let's now have an editorial conversation about your book and how we bring your book from where it is now to what you're telling me you actually meant to write. But there's a lot out there. There's a lot of really interesting stuff being self-published. And I'm a firm believer in a dialogue between agents and writers who don't have an agent yet.
What's your view on self-publishing, by the way?
It's a massive ocean, so it's kind of difficult to think about. We do see very high quality self-published work, and I've been in meetings with publishers, commercial publishers, going, well, you've got to a really interesting level with your self-published books. Wouldn't you like to be in a bookshop? Here's a little bit of money that we can offer you. And the writer goes, I'm making much more money than you can offer me, so it's not even worth being on a bookshelf. There is a lot of sort of nursery slope writing going on, that you self-publish and you see what the reactions are. I think that's really valid. And there's a lot of fanfic and indulgent stuff, and that has its place as well. So I think it's a fantastic ability that we can just make our stuff public now. But it doesn't always have very much of an overlap with what commercial publishing is doing.
Has it got? We often imagine, I mean, in the public opinion, self-publishing doesn't count. I would tend to say is, if you've self-published a book and you say I'm an author, a lot of people will sort of
Mm.
not agree with you on that front. Is that something within the industry as well, where it's sort of looked down upon, or are there really some people who self-publish and you go, oh, well, we can see eye to eye on this. It's the same level, or even you said there were very high quality self-published books.
Yeah, I know one agent who has had a lot of success picking up self-published authors and selling translation rights. And I do some work for her on the film and TV side. So very often I'm doing film and TV options for these books that have been originally self-published. So it's of interest to us. It counts for us.
Mm. About the film and TV rights, I thought we could transition into that now. We'll be talking in the next episode to Mike Carey, who you represent, who has a novel that has been made into a film. So we'll be able to discuss the creative process more in depth with him. Administratively and on your part of the process, how does that work? When do you decide this book would make a good film? Again, do you go out looking for people, or do they come to you going, we read this, we enjoy it? How does that process work?
Well, producers will only look at books that have been traditionally published. So I have regular meetings with producers, asking them what they're looking for, what kind of budget they can manage. So with Mike's space operas that deal, I was talking to a producer yesterday and saying, well, she's a big fan of Mike's writing, but I was saying, okay, so multiverses, and the book that we were talking about had significant secondary character who's basically a big purple bunny, and this kind of drives up the budget because CGI. And I was just like, okay, where you're at as a producer, these books are not for you, but let's go back into Mike's backlist. I've got more grounded stories that I'd like to send to you. But it's a question of building up interest in the authors, but also finding out what producers are looking for in particular. I've just done an option for a series of books about a nun that I didn't think I would sell. And one of my agent colleagues said, oh my goodness, we've got interest from a producer. Can you handle this? And it's just like, are you sure you want to buy this? But, you never say that. Yes, they were sure, and we've done the deal. But it's basically a question of, okay, you say you want this. Here's some things that might fit into that. And you've got a particular author who's looking, a particular script writer who wants something about a nun. Why don't you look at this? And here's a little added extra that I think, because you speak Korean, might be an interesting, personal interest. See what you can cheekily include in that, just to try and sell what you can. And then hopefully they take an option, which is basically they pay a little bit of money for me to take it off the market. So they've got the exclusive right to then try and get a script writer and some cast and some development money and move towards production. And then when they've got the whole package together and they're ready to go, then they actually purchase the rights for hopefully a large amount of money. It depends on the budget. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell.
You were talking earlier about the difference in timing, how long it takes for a novel to come out. What would be the timeline from the moment where a producer goes, okay, let's try this, to the moment it hits our screens?
Short space of time would be 5 to 7 years. So I have just been complaining about the publication process, but when you consider that it's probably going to take 6 weeks to do the option agreement, and then the producer's got to talk to their investors, and then they've got some money, so they go to cast, and they get some cast and a director, say the two main characters and the director, and then they start to go to the funding bodies, so Studio Canal and the BFI and maybe Westdeutsche Rundfunk, if it's a big European thing, or Netflix and Apple and Hulu in the States, try and get some interest there, a bit more money. Everything's looking good. The script is written and is in pretty good shape, and then you lose the principal cast. So then you're sort of thinking, okay, if we can get Jamie Lee Curtis, is she equivalent in money to Kate Winslet? And then you're talking to the financiers going, okay, we've lost this, but is this the same in terms of box office? And then one of your investors drops out, and then all of a sudden you've got to go to another funding body and stuff. And so that's why it takes such a long time. And then you've got to find a release slot for it. So something where there's not too much conflict, because you don't want to have a zombie movie coming out at the same time as 28 years later or something like that.
It sounds like a nightmare.
Who will be a producer? It's crazy.
Sounds absolutely awful. Is that when you have a novel that goes to film or TV, is it common for the author to collaborate on the script writing, or are they completely separate jobs, or will you have a main script writer and then the author comes in and helps, or how does that work, that part of it?
Mike is a very rare creature in that because he has a background in script writing, he was commissioned to do the script for his film, and has done the script for a number of his other option books, which have not been made yet. But that's really rare. Usually they just take the author's work and never want to hear from the author again. So it's a little bit heartbreaking. Sometimes I can broker a nice relationship between the producer and the author, but that's really rare. The producer's paranoid about, oh my God, the author's going to be very resistant to any changes. We need to make changes because the media are so different. The shape of a TV series or a film is so different from a novel. But the producer has bought it because they love it. So you've got a very strange paradox going on. But most producers feel that talking to the author just makes that paradox more chaotic and problematic, and really all they want to do is hear from people who will give them money.
Which must be quite difficult for the author to face, especially because if then that film or that TV show is a flop, everyone will look at the author and go, well, why didn't you stop this? The fan base will hold the author accountable.
Yes, or worse, why didn't you, the film is so much better, why didn't you write the book like that? Which is not what you want to hear. So it's, I have a big therapy session with most authors when it looks as if their work is going to be made, because it's always a shock to see it and a big period of adjustment when you see somebody else's vision of what you thought you wrote. And chances are they'll hate it, and then it exists as a whole different thing. And as you say, it's completely judged differently by the audience. So it's difficult, I think. There was an author who said, yes, take my baby and hit it with a hammer, which is sometimes how it can feel. So we usually just counsel the writer to put the blinkers on, keep looking forward, enjoy the money. That's all.
Which is strange, because you imagine that for a lot of authors, that's also part of the ambition, especially, I'd say, in this modern era. Do you get a lot of people who write a book in the hopes that one day it'll be on Netflix or they'll be able to watch it on the BBC, and then when it actually happens, they have to shut down and almost not be involved to protect themselves from the trauma of it?
Yes, exactly. We get a ton of stuff that's like, here's a heist novel. I wrote it because I think it'll make a great film. And that doesn't cheer us up because the amount of plot that you need for film is so much less than what you need for a novel. So you end up with a really thin novel and a novel that is nakedly sort of, here's the film as I see it, but I'm not a script writer and nobody will commission me to do this heist movie, so I'll just write it as a novel. And then everybody will see how amazing it is and they'll make a film that looks exactly like this. That's really not how it works.
So, would you recommend to those people to just try and write scripts instead?
Yes, but not to write a script without, for instance, going to script school. Script writing is highly technical. And even Mike, after a number of commissioned screenplays, was learning how Hollywood reads a script and what you actually put on the page to transmit to the director what the emotion of that scene is, what the point of that scene is, not how it looks. And, you know, I will read somebody's screenplay if they have just made it up themselves, but it's a very, very long education unless you actually go to film school or take an MA course in script writing. It's just a waste of time trying to just get there by yourself.
Is that somewhere where it's, we were talking earlier about the opportunities for new authors to come from basically any background. Is that somewhere where it's more restricted, you would say?
Very much more. I will certainly look at somebody's screenplay regardless because um, the number of times I've been surprised or even wrong-footed by somebody that I thought, you know, this will never work, and then it's wonderful. So I like to be open to that. But I'd much rather somebody say, I have an MA or an MFA in script writing, and you know that the script that they've sent you has been honed and is a professional standard. And then you sort of think, okay, at least we've got that. Is this something I think I can sell?
Mm. And having done film A levels probably doesn't reach the same level.
No, it's really got to be a script writing course. It helps if you've seen every film that you can find the time for. It's the same as writing. It's a waste of time writing a novel if you aren't also a voracious reader and you haven't been noticing how other writers do it and what you don't like, what you don't think works, and what you do think works, and the techniques that you want to adopt for yourself. Um, so that's really important. But with script writing, you absolutely need to know all the technicals and to start to what they will also do at film school is start you off with a network, which is also crucial.
Mm. It's an industry where who you know is potentially more useful than what you know.
It's a completely different process. It's about my sending a script to a producer and saying, this is amazing, you have to read this. It's just like an incredibly great voice. And the producer saying, oh my God, that's fantastic. Let me meet the author. And the producer and the writer meet up and they find some common ground and then they creatively work together, and a writer then ideally has a portfolio of producers that are commissioning them. But it's much more about what can we make together.
Mm. Okay, a difficult process for screenwriters. When you read a script, is it a bit? I don't know. It's not formatted to be read. It's a thing I've always thought about. For instance, when in school you have to read Shakespeare, it's not really written to be read. So, is it drier? Is it harder to read a script and get the idea of what the final product will look like? Because in many ways, reading a book when you're reading the draft, you're halfway, three-quarters of the way. There's some polishing to do, but you've already got a similar product. With a script, you're nowhere near that product.
That's true, but script agents are used to reading scripts, and I know I have to visualize it. I pretty much have to direct it and, have the actors in my head as I'm reading it, but it's something that we just get used to.
Okay. Let's go back to authors now, and sort of to conclude this episode, what would your main tip be for an aspiring author? Something to take away from this interview and to maybe boost their chances at getting where they want to be?
It's a lot about approaching this seriously. So having the faith that if you put the work in and write something that you believe in, that you want communicated to other people, that agents will respond to that, and that publishers will also see what you're doing and want to support it. Not to be daunted by the sea of other writers, because the numbers are scary, but the number of people who are really genuinely wanting to be writers and putting their best foot forward are actually quite few. So the odds are not quite as horrendous as you might think. Go to writing conferences if you can, writing groups, whatever you can do to meet other writers, potentially get some tips from them, or pass on tips, or just feel like you're in the milieu, and also put yourself in situations where you can meet agents and publishers. So that's writing conferences, science fiction conferences, some of the writing schools do a sort of weekend or a day of seminars, that kind of thing. But the more human contact you have with the industry, you also greatly enhance your chances.
So networking is a key part of it.
Yes, it is. It's a question, if you can find an agent who will, or a publisher who will have a conversation with you, and most of us will, just to say, oh, okay, what you're aiming to do is really interesting. Let me read something, and then you've started a dialogue. And even if it doesn't lead directly to publication, chances are you've learned something, or somebody might say, well, it's not for me, but you might try this particular agent. But that human contact is the fuel that we all run on in this industry.
Do you have a book recommendation to end this on?
That's really difficult because I have very little time to read outside of my clients. So I'm just going to be shameless here and mention the last three books through this agency that have been published, which are Mike Carey's Outlaw Planet, which has just been nominated for a Philip K. Dick Award, Claire North's Slow Gods, which has just come out and is getting fantastic reviews, and probably the last Greek mythology retelling that is going to come from us, which is about Aphrodite, which has also had fantastic reviews, and that's by Phoenicia Rogerson.
You don't have time to read. Do you have time to watch telly a bit, or to go to the cinema? Is there a film or a series?
Oh my goodness, yeah, no. Well, I have the privilege of being part of the part of BAFTA, so we've just been doing the film voting. I saw 2 films last night on my phone because it's getting quite close to the wire. So I see as much film and TV as I possibly can as well. So reading reviews, getting recommendations from other agents. My colleague has given me a big stack of books that I ought to know about. So it's important to be as informed as possible, and it's too big a task for one human being.
So what would be a film or TV recommendation?
I've been enjoying Husband Hotel and Heated Rivalry, and I think on the film side, I loved the new Frankenstein, the Guillermo del Toro. But there've been some interesting smaller films. I loved Goodnight June, which is the current Kate Winslet. So very broad. Found 28 Years Later tough watching. I loved the first two, but watching children die is really difficult. So that was kind of a miss for me.
Well, thank you very much for agreeing to this interview. Maybe I'll contact you again around the BAFTAs for another one around the BAFTAs if you're up for it.
Well, thanks very much, Sebastien. It's been really nice to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to this first episode of The Hole in the Page. If you have any questions for future episodes and our future guests, please leave them either in the comments on YouTube or via the email address wrnc.sebastien@gmail.com. Any questions you leave, we will try to answer in future episodes. In the meantime, you can find all of the podcasts and information on wrnc.eu or worldradioparis.org. All of the episodes will also be uploaded in video form to our YouTube channel.